Hi and welcome to 12.3. Here we will be discussing about sexual reproduction in animals again. This is the part 2 where we will study about oogenesis or production of the female sex cell. Um, Again, I want to tell you because this is a complex process, but only just the oogenesis bit is there in your syllabus. We have to overview the female reproductive system, but that is not there in your syllabus. If you're finding the video to be too long and descriptive, please feel free to play it at 1.2 times or 2 times faster speed, whichever suits you the most. Okay, so let's move ahead with learning about some key terms. Pause the video to write down the meaning of these terms if you haven't in the previous task. Moving ahead, let's take a look at the female reproductive system and the function of different organs in this system. In the front view of the female reproductive system, you can see that it is made up of a pear-shaped structure called the uterus. Um, Two extensions from either side of the uterus are the oviduct or the fallopian tube. They have finger-like projections at their ends. These are called the fimbriae. The lining of the uterus is thick and rich with blood supply and muscular. That is called the endometrium. The opening of the uterus is known as the cervix. It protects and guards the entry of the uterus, and the outermost opening of the female reproductive tract, which is the birth canal, is the vagina. End of the birth canal is the vagina. Let's look at the function of each structure over here. So ovary is the primary sex organ of human females, and they not only produce the egg cells or the oocytes, but they are also necessary for the production of the female sex hormone. These are the estrogen and progesterone. The cervix is the muscular opening that guards the uterus, and finally the vagina is the passage which leads to the inside of the uterus. This is a side view of the female reproductive system for you to notice the position of all the reproductive organs with respect to the intestine, rectum, the spinal cord. So you can see how the female reproductive system lies in between the excretory system and the digestive system. This is the rectum leading to the anus, and this is the urinary bladder leading to the urethra, which excretes your urine. And in between is the vagina, leading to the cervix, cervix leading to the uterus, uterus leading to the oviduct, fimbriae, and the ovary. Let us now look at the detailed structure of a section taken from a mammalian ovary. So as I told you, the ovaries are the primary sex organs in the human female, and they occur in pairs on either side of the uterus. They are found in the pelvic region of your body, in the pelvic cavity. As we shall see later, the ovaries are responsible for producing sex hormones and ova. So you don't have to study about the hormones and how it controls the ova production, but you need to know that your body works and releases the ova in a certain pattern once in a month, because this cycle is controlled by the estrogen and progesterone hormones. Now, if you look at the internal structure of this ovary, you will see that it is lined by a layer of cells, and these are called the germinal epithelium. Um, the outer margin of the ovary looks slightly more denser or thicker. This is called the cortex region, and the middle region, which looks lighter in color, this is called the medulla. The process by which the eggs will be formed in the ovary is known as oogenesis, and interestingly, your body starts producing your oocytes when you are already in your mother's womb. So from that stage itself, we begin producing our egg cells. But these egg cells are not mature. Once you are born, so once you're out from your mother's womb, you stop producing new immature egg cells. So whatever is already there, that is your finite number of primary or immature oocytes that will mature later in your life. No more oogonia will be formed after birth. So oogonia is basically the egg cells that are formed by multiple mitosis of these germinal epithelium. So you can see lots of oogonia over here. So you can see oogonia here. These are going to later on develop into the primary follicle. Okay. So oogonia divides into primary oocytes by mitosis. So this is a primary cell surrounded by ray-like structure. These ray-like structures are other cells called follicles. They just surround and form a coating around the primary oocyte. So then what happens? Then the oocyte surrounded by these follicular cells start growing. And these follicular cells will start producing a fluid which will fill up the space between the follicle and the primary oocyte. The outer layer of the ovary produces primary oocyte. It will produce follicle cells that congregate around the oocytes, forming a structure called primary follicle. This is a primary follicle. Inside the follicle is the primary oocyte, and on its border is margined follicular cells. You will find primary follicles towards the margin of the ovary. Never will you find them in a medulla region. By the time a baby girl is born, the primary oocytes in the primary follicles have started their first meiotic division. So once the baby is ready to come out of the mother's womb, its primary follicles will begin their first meiotic division. Okay. Now something happens over here. Once it begins its first meiotic division means it will reach its prophase 1 and it will halt at that stage. And all the primary follicles will halt at their prophase 1 stage in that baby girl until she reaches her puberty. So what happens to us in our puberty? We begin our menstrual cycle or ovarian cycle. That is nothing but the phase when our primary follicles which were at prophase 1, they start developing into metaphase 1, anaphase 1, and then finally first meiosis happens at puberty. The follicle cells around these primary follicles will start thickening and will start producing a fluid. So you can see how there is a gap. The gap is because the follicular cells starts thickening. The oocyte is there in the center. And now this oocyte is the result of one meiotic division. So it is called a secondary follicle with a secondary oocyte in it. Okay. The more the follicular cell starts growing, the more mature the follicle becomes and more fluid starts getting filled in it. So now this stage, this is called the tertiary follicle. And the further more it will develop and now it becomes a fully mature follicle, which is also known as a Graafian follicle. Once the fluid filled space becomes more swollen, after a point of time, the germinal epithelium region of this ovary will burst, and this secondary oocyte, which was formed after one meiosis division, will get released out. And this is the time when the fimbriae will capture this oocyte. So notice that the oocyte leaves the ovary only after the first meiotic division. Okay, second meiotic division has not happened yet. So this egg cell is leaving the ovary in its secondary oocyte stage. Where will it go now? Can you tell? Yes. Next it goes into the oviduct or the fallopian tube. So this process of exiting the ovary is called the ovulation. And again, just like testosterone controls spermatogenesis, estrogen and progesterone are the female sex hormone which maintain this cycle of ovulation once in every month. So now let's see more details about what happens to that secondary oocyte after it leaves the ovary. So I will mute the video and maybe use the subtitle so that we can see what is happening. So you can see the side view of the female reproductive system showing ovaries with oogonium or the diploid germ cells. They will undergo mitosis several times before birth and form many primary oocytes. Once you're born, then whatever number of primary oocytes are already formed, that will only remain. Now these primary oocytes will just initiate their meiosis 1, but that meiosis 1 will halt at prophase 1 stage, and it will remain in halted condition till the girl or the baby girl reaches her puberty. As long as you haven't hit your puberty, your primary oocyte is just growing in size. It will not divide. But when you hit your puberty, then meiosis 1 begins. And when meiosis 1 is beginning, here I will pause to tell you what's happening. So if this meiosis 1 started, so the primary oocyte now split into two daughter cells, that is a secondary oocyte and first polar body. Look at them carefully. These two daughter cells are not equal in size. The purpose of this unequal division is to make sure that the secondary oocyte has lots of cytoplasm with lots of organelle, because this is going to be the future female gamete. Then why is the first polar body there? Can you think about it? You can pause for a moment and think. So the purpose of the first polar body is just to ensure that the primary oocyte, which was diploid, got a chance to produce two daughter cells which are haploid. So this is the first meiotic division that happened. In the first meiotic division, there is equal reduction, halving of the chromosomes happen, but unequal cytokinesis, means unequal cytoplasmic separation happens. After a period of time, this polar body will disintegrate, but this secondary oocyte will form the Graafian follicle and exit the ovary, just as we saw previously. So now you see the secondary oocyte is reaching the surface, preparing to ovulate. Here you clearly see that the ovulation process is begun. The secondary oocyte leaves the ovary, and as soon as it leaves the ovary, secondary oocyte gets ready for meiosis 2. But secondary oocyte will not do meiosis 2 until it comes in contact with the sperm. So here I will pause again. Notice, as soon as the sperm breaks the egg's membrane, this is the egg's membrane, not the ovary. Okay. So once it breaks the egg's membrane, immediately the secondary oocyte gets a signal that sperm is trying to enter the egg membrane. So it will quickly complete its meiosis 2. If there is no sperm entry over here and no sperm meeting or fertilizing, coming for fertilization, then the secondary oocyte will never have its second meiosis. So this is an interesting case in case of human egg cells. So the secondary oocyte doesn't do meiosis 2 and halts at metaphase 2 and doesn't proceed if it doesn't come in contact with the sperm. So let's take a look once again over here. So you're seeing secondary oocyte being released. This is just after meiosis 1. As soon as meiosis 1 uh, happens, completes, the secondary oocyte prepares for meiosis 2. But something happens over here. Once it enters the fallopian tube, it will not complete its meiosis 2 and halt at metaphase 2 until it meets a sperm cell. Okay. So here you can see it has halted at the secondary oocyte. This is the oogonium which was deployed in the baby girl in the mother's womb. Lots of mitosis happened and many primary oocytes were formed. Then the baby was born and she stopped producing more primary oocytes. So whatever primary oocytes were there, they started growing until she reached her puberty. When she reached her puberty, all these primary oocytes which were stuck at meiosis 1 or prophase 1 will now proceed, do their meiosis 1, complete it, and produce two haploid nuclei. But when these two haploid nuclei separate, the chromosomes don't separate equally. One cell will get lots of cytoplasm. Sorry, the chromosomes will equally separate and become half, but cytoplasm is unequally divided. Secondary oocyte gets lots of cytoplasm and haploid nucleus, and the first polar body disintegrates or dies. Then the secondary oocyte will leave the ovary and go into the oviduct. While doing that, it is preparing for meiosis 2. Luckily, if the secondary oocyte gets to fuse or comes in contact with a sperm, immediately it will complete its meiosis 2, and once meiosis 2 is done, it will be ready for fertilization, and this egg cell will no more be an egg cell, it will become a zygote as the sperm's nuclei will fuse. So N and N will become 2N. But suppose the female did not have any sexual intercourse, so there's no sperm entry, and the secondary oocyte is waiting, has not completed meiosis 2. Then what happens? Then the girl goes through her menstruation, so that the secondary oocyte doesn't implant and it is just sloughed or flushed out from the uterus along with the menstrual blood. So no fertilization happens because no sperm has entered. So the secondary oocyte doesn't do its meiosis 2. It is just removed in its meiosis 1 stage only. So this is something that you need to remember. Once again, this is a flow chart diagram showing different stages of oogenesis. Again, oogenesis also begins with diploid oogonia cell who are multiplying in number. This is happening when the girl is still in the womb of the mother in the form of a fetus. So in fetal condition, it's the baby is producing lots and lots of oogonium, and the oogonium are further undergoing mitosis and forming primary oocyte. Out of all the primary oocytes, one will start growing and will stop at meiosis 1, that is prophase 1. Then when the girl is born and reaches her puberty, that's when the meiosis 1 will get completed, and this primary oocyte will split into a secondary oocyte and a first polar body. This marks the beginning of the maturation phase. Whose maturation? The secondary oocyte. Now this secondary oocyte will get ovulated, or it will be removed. It will get released from the ovary and it will enter the oviduct. If the oviduct has sperms entering. Then as soon as the sperm comes in contact with the secondary oocyte will go through the second meiotic division and will form another polar body and an ovum. This mature ovum is haploid, and this is later going to fuse with the sperm nucleus and form the zygote. Suppose the secondary oocyte doesn't meet a sperm, no meiosis II will happen, and all of these ovum will degenerate and get removed from the vagina as menstrual flow. Let's take a look at the summary. You may pause the video and read through all the points. And with that, we conclude about oogenesis. And the next activity that you will be doing is reading page 371 from your Mary Jones ebook. Please make sure that you are going through the spermatogenesis and oogenesis flow diagram more closely and looking at the details of when mitosis occurs and when meiosis occurs. Thank you.